If you own a production facility, manufacturing plant, a processing plant, and you're 30 years, 40 years old, you probably already know that your electric room is nearing obsolete, all right? It's a little bit of a concern. People have brought it up to you before. It's a significant consideration. There's only 3 words that really matter at this point. What's my plan? What's your plan? I'm Lynn Hinderrocker with WildBiz TV. We're in Sioux Center, Iowa. We're visiting with Dave Taylor. He's an electrician out here with Interstates, very interesting organization that does a lot of these electric room upgrades and rehabs and so on. Thanks for joining me here on WildBiz TV, Dave.
You bet.
Hey, we're looking at a complex project. We walk into these rooms, this equipment that's been in there, the fuse boxes and the circuits and all the different motors and everything. They've been there for a long time, 30, 40 years. I know in my heart, this thing's it's got to change, all right? We're going to have a disaster on our hands. You're a planner. That's what you do for a living out here at Interstates. Tell me, how do we approach the planning process? I have a feeling a lot of people will be more comfortable if they understood how would we go about doing this thing.
Sure.
So tell me.
Generally, there's a lot of options that we can look at.
Sure.
But first things first, we have to understand what the client is looking for. What are their interests? What are their concerns? What's their plans for future?
Sure. Now, generally speaking, they want continuity, right?
Yeah.
They just want this plant to run, continue to produce revenue, all right?
Correct.
That's number one, right? But I'm sure downtime, because there is a transition phase, right? That's got to be a consideration, right?
Yep. So we look at downtime. There's a lot of time factors, actually. There's the downtime. There's the how soon does this changeover have to occur?
Yeah.
It's really looking at how much risk is there by being down. There's a lot of factors that go into.
That's right. Time creates risk. Yep. What about space? I mean, there's a lot of equipment there, and what do? You think like, how long is it going to take to pull this out and replace it with something the same size, or do you make the room larger? What do you do?
There's options there too. Depending on space, if we're going to do a full gut, if we're going to pull out the old equipment and put in the new equipment, that's one option. Obviously, that takes more time.
Sure.
Because you're doing the full process. In that room.
And just there's more equipment now. I mean, it's different than when it was originally installed.
Right.
So I don't even know, will it typically fit in there? Is it smaller or larger?
That's where we have to start investigating, figuring out what exists for documentation, Power 1 lines, MCC drawings, schematics.
Yeah.
We got to start sorting through the information we have and validate that information against what's there.
Dave Taylor, if you had to just do nothing every day but plan one of these transitions, and you were focused just on doing that, how long would it take typically to get a really comprehensive, detailed, time-oriented, budget-oriented, and really have a great, confident plan? What are we talking, a week, a month?
Well, it varies a little bit on the size of the scope, but generally speaking, I would say within 2 to 3 weeks, we'd have a pretty good idea of what we're up against.
What we're working with?
If we have to go into more detail and we're talking about a gutting versus build a new one.
Sure.
And get that staged and then just do a changeover,
yes.
That's a whole different scenario. That's probably a couple months.
Yeah, okay. So those 2 scenarios are the 2 scenarios we have to kind of think about, right?
Yep.
Which one is the fastest? I mean, is the gutting, that's the longer, more complex?
Yep. There's a lot more that has to be investigated in the gutting situation. Ideally, if there's room in the facility, it would be a lot easier and it would minimize the amount of changeover time if we could just have a new structure in place next to the existing room or bring in a prefabricated facility.
Now tell me about that. You're talking about bringing in a prefab, like a little building or something just adjacent to the existing electric room.
We'd basically determine what capacity they're looking for, what we need to match up what's existing, and replace it with new. It would show up with the equipment in it.
Right.
And it would already have the tie-ins planned.
I see. That seems like a pretty slick solution. Why wouldn't everybody just go that route? Is it they just don't have the space maybe, or don't want to spend on the additional equipment? That'd probably be more expensive, or not?
There's a little additional cost involved.
Sure.
But again, you got to weigh that cost against the amount of time that your plan is down.
A lot of trade-offs and a lot of looking at, if I do this, then I give up that.
Exactly.
Now, you're a professional planner. This is what you do in your industry. If you had to give one tip to a CEO, he's sitting there, he's listening to a big, long meeting, detailed schematics, all that kind of stuff. He says, I just don't know what to do, Dave. How would you help him? What little piece of advice would you give him to kind of get his hands around how to make the right decision? First of all, I think you'd say, how much time do you really have? Right? That'd be one, huh? All right.
Do we have the space? Do you have the time?
Right. To do it right.
To do it thoroughly, so that there aren't any hiccups when it comes to commissioning.
Is there a testing process? I mean, you don't just throw the equipment in there and say, good to go. I mean, I assume there's a lot of making sure everything works together and there's tweaking or what?
Yeah, when we do the investigation, we got to figure out what's there, go through all the schematics, make sure all the ratings, the voltages and the amperages are all adequate for what's actually being operated at the time.
Sure.
Make sure that that's sufficient to replace.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dave, when you get in and you scope in one of these projects out, is it difficult to read all the different ratings and the way things were written and organized 30 years ago might be a little different than they are now?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's complications. If you go into a facility that's 30 years old, there's been a lot of
changes?
Year after year, we're going to add this equipment or we're going to change this equipment.
Right.
Documentation of that rarely happens over the years. And if it does, we're pretty lucky, but it's pretty rare.
Okay. Dave, we're looking for efficiency. Obviously, that's a very important part of keeping operations going.
Yep.
And this transition's got to be an efficient transition, right?
Yes.
Can you gauge, this is going to be 25, this is going to be 50% more efficient in its operations, or, it's going to 29% more reliable? Do those kinds of metrics come up, or do you just say, well, it's definitely better than what you had?
From an efficiency standpoint, I couldn't really say, but from a safety, there's a lot of improved safety by upgrading
the benefits
equipment.
Would be pretty tangible and measurable there.
Yes, the safety plan would be a lot easier with the newer equipment because the regulations on new equipment are much improved compared to 30 years ago.
Yes.
Probably the biggest deal is the amount of manpower that you need doing a traditional gut project versus
now we're getting to it. Right?
Versus
it's the
a
manpower
structure,
thing.
versus the structure or a prefab unit.
So that's
you have in the gutting situation, you have 8 to 10 guys trying to get cramped in a room to do all this work in a rush versus the majority of that work happening.
Sounds a little chaotic to me.
Off-site or in a room adjacent to where you need to be.
Where it's a little more under control,
yes,
one thing at a time,
control.
And a lot more space. Well, Dave Taylor, this is a fascinating, and I know that you're a great planner because all planners understand there's millions of variables to manage. It's not cut and dry. It's not a black and white deal.
True.
And clearly you appreciate that. And when you're working with clients, I'm sure you make sure that they understand there's nuance as they make all these decisions, right?
Yes.
All right. These electric room upgrades are fascinating. It's a compelling topic. It's complex. Guys like Dave Taylor can break it down so we have a handle on things. Thanks so much for visiting with me. And thanks for watching Wild Biz TV. I'm Lynn Hinderrocker. We'll see you next time.